Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Legacy of Yangchen chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 32, which is called Blinking First. And so this is a huge chapter because this is effectively the defeat of Chai Si. There's still a little bit more to go in terms of actually dealing with Thapa, but in terms of Yangchen versus Chai Si, the battle of who can play the game the best, this is in essence where it comes to an end, minus the question of how does Yangchen deal with Thapa, basically. So it's a good chapter, it has to be said. This is a very well executed chapter. It's all nicely done. The problem remains, though. I believe this is pretty much the last time we actually get Chai Si talking in a chapter. And that's where the kind of, I think, frustration comes in of we'll get to what kind of her last line of dialogue is and kind of why they don't kind of come back to her. But you know, we'll get there as we go through the chapter, basically. So I love the opening of the chapter. Yangchen looked into Chai Si's eyes with honest admiration. The Zongdu of Jondari had simply given herself so much permission. And I love that that's what's kind of discussed here. It's just what does that mean? And it's ultimately this kind of perfect way of framing how each of these two women kind of view themselves as these pseudo world leaders. And with regards to when playing the game, how much permission to do these kind of crazy things do they kind of allow themselves, and how easy is it for them to, accept that permission, basically. And the idea is that Chai Si is just so effortlessly confident in everything that she does, that she just has an unlimited supply of the currency that gets you that permission. And Yangchen is kind of a bit jealous of the fact that she can be that confident, just give herself so much permission to do anything that she wishes, go against everyone. That's the kind of whole idea. Even kind of pointing out that oh, no wonder Chai Si read so much Lahima and Shoken. Only those exalted minds could equal her in certainty of purpose. And that speaks to the kind of difference here, Yangchen is a little bit conflicted about the exact kind of approach she wants to take, because she always considers every single aspect, whereas Chai Si knows exactly what she wants to do and will give herself permission to do anything to get there. And there's the difference. And they sort of frame it there of just the idea of Yangchen, lines have been drawn all around her in a cracked glass web. To cross any one of them would condemn her as a bad avatar. Whereas there's so much stability and ease with the way it is around Chai Si. And that is the difference between these two at this point. But we are coming to the kind of end of their duel to a certain degree here. And that's what we're getting to here. So Yangchen looks at Taku, and she of course sees the big kind of slope of the hill as we know it looks like. And notes that Chai Si, Iwashi in this case, has been doing some of his duty to kind of keep this place looking nice. This is why it's regarded as being the most kind of well off of the Shang cities in terms of this is the rich Shang city. But she notes, when viewed from this angle, if you look at it from above, and Yangchen can fly, she's an air nomad, she can see things from above. Taku is this elaborate piece of stagecraft. The perfect center of the city, the famous part in a way, looks fantastic, and it looks like it represents everything it's known to be. But it says here, she knew that outside the city limits, paper mills belched noxious odors into the sky as vats of slurried stewed in the alchemical fixers. Farther down the trade routes, silk pillars died by thousands of millions, boiled in their cocoons to unravel their threads. Entire villages of workers along the famous perfume trails had permanently damaged their sense of smell and taste from mixing batches of product by hand. So it's just that idea that to make this city this perfect visual, there's all this kind of darker, more brutal stuff going on kind of behind the scenes. The kind of rough, the grunt work that has to be done to make this thing look really, really fantastic. And it's noted here kind of a comparison between when people visit the air temples, they note the incredible amount of chores that the monks and nuns do in a way, in comparison to the expectation for the air nomads, is they spend hours and hours of the day meditating, but like they've got to earn that meditation by doing all of that work in a way, and people don't look at the kind of random stuff that needs to be done to get to the stuff that you're mainly known for. That sort of idea. And it's just, the idea of, it says here, enlightenment was a muscle and the world was too heavy for most. So Yangchen makes her move at this point. She goes over, they've walked out onto the balcony at this point. So she goes back to the balcony and just like earth bends, kind of seals it over with earth bending, but then turns this now kind of like door into this kind of like cover around them, basically. So they're kind of sealed in here with this earth bending. And Chai-Si is like unable to react to this because Yangchen does this so suddenly and quickly. She's like, what are you doing? Like, we have privacy here. And of course, this is Chai-Si trying to keep up the act. Like, the pretense of like what they're actually talking about hasn't fully kind of come into play. Even though Yangchen tried to bring it down, they're still not quite getting to like the core of everything that they're talking about here, because Yangchen has information, and she's about to reveal what that information is to Chai-Si. What was in the letter that Jujinta got? Well, we already know what it is, and this is Yangchen making her move using that information. Yangchen didn't reply. She leaned back and punched a gust of wind up at the great bronze gong, knocking the metal so it rang. Then she does it again, and then a third time. And I like the emphasis on the third one. But in this world, Nujian was dead. An entire island of people had vanished, and Yangchen had swallowed her fill of half measures. For emphasis more than anything else, she leaped straight up and angled an overhead kick at the gong for a third sharp gust. A heels overhead strike. She like backflips back down next to Chai-Si, kind of earthbending, kind of cool landing, and she's right next to Chai-Si again, except what she's done here, this is the signal for Thapa that we learned from Kalyan. This is what was delivered by Jujinta. So Yangchen has signaled Thapa to attack. And now the time pressure is on. He's getting ready to do whatever he's planning to do. The difference here is that Yangchen doesn't know where he is. Chai-Si does. So now it's sort of Yangchen being like, in a way, I'm comfortable regardless of whatever happens, because I'm assuming you right now are probably somewhere in the blast radius to a certain degree here. You make the move now, Chai-Si. That's the position that Yangchen has kind of put them in. That's why the chapter is called Blinking First. And Yangchen tries to play it cool, like, what are you playing at? Release me this instant. But Yangchen just kind of wants her to finally just kind of acknowledge what is actually being discussed here. And so she's just like, Yangchen's like, okay, well, if you're not willing to do it, I'll force your hand. Do you know what makes an air nomad an air nomad? The ability to sit quietly with oneself, anywhere, any place, without want or plan. I thought the two of us might try that together. And Chai-Si is getting, like, anxious at this point. Like, we can't stay here. And Yangchen's just like, why not? Nothing crazy's going on, is it? I just hit the bell. Do you know something I don't know? That type of thing. Like, finally admit you know what's going on here, basically. We shouldn't be in any danger. This space is no different from a hermit cell. Certainly no harm will come to you by my hand. And then, I love this moment here. Yangchen leaned closer, her grin uncontrollable. I happen to know that Thapa requires a little bit of time to work up to a really large blast. I might be able to save us before then, if you give me his location. And Chai-Si's trembling at this point, calms herself down, and is like, so this is your game, betting it all on who blinks first. I didn't paint you as such an irresponsible leader. And so this is her final, kind of in a way, desperate act here to try and turn things around. And that is to kind of force Yangchen to deal with this situation in like a different way and just like free her before it goes wrong in the way that it'll actually go wrong for her. And she's like, okay, let me try and kind of guilt her into ending this. Deal with the idea of you will have regrets if you die here. Like that. Like, think about that. Are you willing to die to kind of prove something to me here? Think about the situation you'd leave behind, Avatar. Taku in chaos, the four nations in disarray. You don't want to depart this world bearing such heavy regrets now, would you? And Yangchen just bursts out laughing. And I think it's really, really well done, because it's just this idea of, like, if you've been following Yangchen's arc over these books, you know the idea of trying to, like, in a way, hurt Yangchen over the idea of regrets is a laughable idea. And that shows, like, as much as Chicey knows Yangchen to a certain degree and has the kind of advantage in some ways, wow, she's kind of miscalculated here, but it speaks to how desperate Chicey is. And it's just this idea, threatening the Avatar with regrets was like trying to drown a fish. She has so many regrets already herself. She has spent so much of her life, in a way, talking to past avatars. And in a way, learning the main thing about past avatars is the regrets that they have. She knows exactly about this. And for her, as the avatar, this reincarnating being, leaving behind some regrets is sort of like, it's a guarantee in a way. Like, it's going to happen regardless of what happens. So if there's these ones here about like Taku and Chaos, like, so be it, in a way. She says, I can't leave this world. She gasped as she wiped a tear from her eye. I'm trapped. I always come back. Haven't you heard? And then she turns it around. And this is the victory here. You, on the other hand, Zhongdu Chai-Si, think about what you'd leave behind. The whites of Chai-Si's eyes grew. And Yangchen just delivers the kind of final blow here. A forward-thinking person like yourself would have made plenty of assurances for your sudden and untimely demise. Your organization can survive without its head until it finds a new one. And you've probably drawn up contracts to leave money where you see fit. And the idea is that, yeah, this is typical. Like, most rich people would probably do something like that. And then this is the point at which, like, she really gets her. Yangchen just, like, absolutely takes out Chai-Si with this one. I'm sure you can trust your subordinates with your legacy, given how exemplary a leader you are. Yangchen giggled. Some tales were too hard to spin with a straight face. She wasn't that good an actor. I'd bet the world that your son will be well taken care of by all those men and women you've paid. And Chai-Si is just like, he's under the hall. Like, she just knows in that moment she has lost, because her regrets mean so much more to her than any regrets Yangchen would have. Because Chai-Si's weakness is her legacy. What she wants to achieve reveals what her legacy is. We've already seen, in a way, this whole idea of, like, family and the kind of pros and cons in terms of, like, it could be this weakness and, like, forcing Kalyan with the threat of injuring Kavik to reveal this information that, in a way, negatively impacts this other aspect of Kalyan's family, the relationship here with Chai-Si, and stuff like that. And then Chai-Si falls effectively because of that information, and because the threat of something potentially happening to her son if she is not there to kind of protect and be the kind of dominant figure to keep that structure going. And I kind of really like that it ultimately kind of comes back to the idea of, like, yeah, some of this stuff would be dealt with automatically, but, like, do you really think that, like, with you dead, the people who you've effectively hired and probably don't, and we know basically don't treat super well, you think they are going to, out of the goodness of their hearts, like, super, like, nicely care about your son and just build him up to be the next, like, leader? Like, without you there to guide him along that way, is that going to happen when these are people you've basically just kind of, quote unquote, paid, kind of / brainwashed to do all of this stuff? And she knows she's defeated in that moment. And I think that's wonderful, the way that all kind of comes together, that it's simple in a way, but it is perfect for the setup of Chai-Si ultimately. That's the thing. It doesn't mean anything for her if her legacy isn't actually allowed to continue. And so this isn't even enough for Yangchen. Like, just knowing he's under the hall, he's like, she says, there's a basement under the floorboards of the convocation hall. Thapa's sealed inside. You have to extract him. And Yangchen's just like, you've lied to me so many times. I can't take anything you say at face value. I could go down there, come back, and you'd be gone. Like, you know, I need a bit more than that, basically. And Chai-Si's freaking out at this point. Like, she's up next to Yangchen, grabbing her, like, what is wrong with you? There's no time left. But Yangchen just kind of holds it calm. She wants to really see a sense that Chai-Si is telling the truth, and this means as much as it means. And she's like, Avatar Yangchen, she begged, save me, please. And she's on her knees next to Yangchen at this point, just begging her. She says, I made a mistake. I put us in danger. This is all my fault. My doing. And then Yangchen's still just like, okay, we're most of the way there. I need something a little bit more. Will you get it in time? Please, I'll do anything to make it right. And Yangchen's like, okay, good enough. And she just leaps out immediately. She just leaps out of the kind of structure that they're in into the air. She knows basically where Thapa is roughly and goes into the avatar state. And she notes that this is a hugely dangerous and irresponsible thing to do. To put the avatar cycle at risk by going into the avatar state, knowing that a combustion bender could already be ready to attack with her, like, just jumping into the air, into the avatar state. But she does have enough time. In the avatar state, she views the hull as like an architect's model just on a plate. And all she does is she just kind of swivels it to the side. The whole building, the whole convocation hall, she basically just swivels it so that basically she uncovers the kind of basement area where Thapa is. So she just kind of like peels it off, puts it over to the side, and then at this point she basically, I think, drops out of the avatar state. I think at this point, is it? Yeah, because I think they note that like the danger kind of roughly passes at this point, and then she's more thinking in her normal way rather than like avatar kind of god Yangchen in the avatar state. But she spots Thapa down there. A sole occupant stood keeper, Thapa. Chicey had stashed him under the target location itself, outfoxing anyone who knew that like range was the notable thing about combustion benders, and so this is why he was impossible to find, because no one expected the idea that they would go for a kind of super like direct, like he is right underneath them. Now it's unclear about, like, I'm guessing the idea is that this is kind of borderline meant to be some sort of a sacrifice type thing, like he would set off a combustion blast like directly underneath, kind of killing the world leaders, but probably also himself in the process. It seems to sort of be that sort of idea, because the big point in all of this is Thapa inhaled one last time and looked up at her. There was a glassy, distant sheen to his eyes, from hunger or isolation or something else she couldn't identify. The selfish cunning that normally oozed from the man was nowhere to be found in his blank expression. So this is obviously him under the brainwashing, and sort of like the reveal that, like, yeah, you do sort of look, I guess, vacant to a certain degree when you're under the direct control of brainwashing. I think probably highlighting that, like, Thapa, in full control of himself, probably would never agree to potentially set off an explosion like on floorboards like directly above himself, because that just seems like basically suicide ultimately. But I guess for Chicey, like, is she willing to sacrifice her last combustion bender? I would guess, probably knowing that she has like kind of chi blockers and maybe other benders out there theoretically, it would be fine to do the key thing she needs this kind of ultimate assassin for. So this is what we get then. It's this setup. It's kind of the exact same situation from the chapter The Duel from a while ago. It's Yangchen in the air, Thapa in perfect position, spots his target, lets off a blast. What does Yangchen do here? In that, in the earlier chapter, Ming-Yer got injured, but he didn't suffer any sort of like explosive kind of injury. He suffered some sort of a pressure-related injury that kind of caused his lungs to collapse. But otherwise, Yangchen and Ming-Yer got out of that without being blown up. And we don't know how that actually happened from that earlier chapter. And it's kind of the same idea here. As this combustion blast comes in, Yangchen is now confident about what to do. The distinct pop-pop of unanimity sounded. No matter, Yangchen thought, strangely at peace as she brought her hands up. This is all right. She'd made a choice of her own long ago. And so next chapter we are going to get the reveal about what happened in a way, you know, what happened back at the end of like the duel, basically. And it's going to give us a little bit of an idea about how she is perfectly ready to combat a combustion bender without just sucking the air out of the room that they're in. So there's a huge kind of setup here. There's a little bit of a moment where like Yangchen, right before he fires off the blast, tries to like argue with him of like, don't, like, you have a choice, but she doesn't get to say it because the blast just goes off, because of course she's talking to someone under the effects of brainwashing, so it's not going to get through to him. And that's why the final line, she made a choice of her own long ago, is so kind of interesting and important. Yeah, that is where the chapter comes to an end. And this is so interesting because, like, I think it in so many ways is kind of a kind of perfect way to defeat Chai-Si, of bringing up the idea of like the regrets of an avatar, and Yangchen just finally kind of in a way accepting, acknowledging that's part of the job. It doesn't have as big of an impact as you would think on her. At the very least with Chai-Si, she is completely able to reverse that situation, knowing the kind of significance of legacy to Chai-Si. That, like, in that sense, that is ideal. That this is the perfect way to turn around that weakness on Chai-Si, but also it fits perfectly for Yangchen's arc of like, you know, yeah, I that doesn't mean anything to me. I'm the avatar. Of course that's the case. Like, I'll always have regrets. That's what it kind of is to be the avatar. That's not going to work. And again, the moment of just complete capitulation on behalf of Chai-Si, the second it comes down to like, do you trust the people you've hired like enough to be loyal to you after your death? And it's basically like, no. Like that is the interpretation that I ultimately kind of have about that, because she is so like commanding of a person. Would they just be loyal to her when she's gone? And the answer is really no. So that's kind of really strong. Like I said, the only kind of weakness here is just that this is basically the final time we truly get to see Chai-Si. We are told what her kind of quote unquote like fate is as a character, like what she is up to at the end, but we don't get sort of a chance to kind of question her over like, okay, we know basically kind of like why you did this, but how did this all come about? Like, that's the real question that you want to know. There's a few questions that Chai-Si just, you feel like, had to like reveal the answers to us, and it felt like it's perfectly set up here in terms of like, okay, we deal with the action now, and then when the action is over, we finally turn around to confront Chai-Si, a defeated Chai-Si over. Now, what went on here? You know, how do you know this? Is there more to this? Those sort of questions. And look, we'll get to it as we go through about like, you know, what is clearly missing, what you know, is well done and stuff like that. But you know, it's one of those chapters where it's an important chapter. The defeat of the main villain happens here, because we basically after this point switch over to the idea of like, now the final confrontation with combustion bending. How do you defeat it more head on? And we're about to kind of see that happen, along with probably one of the more impressive kind of shock twist reveals in the books as well. So next chapter is going to be quite exciting to kind of cover as well, because I certainly didn't see it coming really at all. I think they kind of played that aspect of it kind of perfectly. But yeah, big chapter. Love so much about what they do. It's just, I don't think there's a good enough follow-up in a way to this chapter on the Chai-Si front. And that's really probably my only kind of criticism about this one. Otherwise, I think so much of it is so well constructed. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this chapter, the defeat of Chai-Si here. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.